You're listening to Sustainably Geeky, the podcast for everyday environmentalists.
Hi, you're listening to Sustainably Geeky, episode 71. We are back after a little bit of a summer break, and I'm excited to be back with one of our returning guests. You may remember her from an episode we did way back in April of 2021. We are talking with Brittanny Belanger. She is the founder of Earthub, an organization that works to spread awareness about sustainability, engineering, eco-friendly products. And she has a lot of exciting programs that she does through that organization. So I'm excited to talk about that. We're also going to discuss the circular economy, which is something that we have talked about on this podcast before. Back in January of 2020, we did an episode about that. So if you're interested in learning more, you can go back and listen. But this is kind of an update to see some of those things in action, and also just talk about some of the progress that's been made in that area since it has been a few years. So Brittanny, thanks for joining again. And can you just start, I guess, by telling us more about Earthub and your inspiration in founding the organization?
Oh, well, first of all, thank you for having me back. Super exciting to be back. So Earthub is an organization I started in 2018. That's when the idea came around. So I realized a lot of people around me weren't recycling or didn't know many things about minimal consumption. And growing up, I was always taught to live very minimally, to save all my money for travel. So that was kind of always ingrained in my mind. So in 2018, I started coming up with the idea of Earthub and how I could educate people around me, how I could keep things out of the landfill. And then I launched on January 1st of 2019. So it actually all started with prescription pill bottles. I was taking a lot of medications at the time, and I realized that my pharmacy would not reuse the bottles for the same medication for me, the same person. So I was consistently facing refusal, and it just really bothered me that I had this perfectly good piece of plastic that couldn't be reused. So I kind of went down a rabbit hole, and I said to myself, there has to be somewhere in the world that reuses these perfectly good pill bottles. So sure enough, I found Matthew 25 Ministries, which is a humanitarian relief organization, and they reuse them as medical supplies. So it all started with a collection of prescription pill bottles. I posted on social media that I was collecting, and at one point in time, we had nearly 150 drop-off locations in Canada and the US to collect these prescription pill bottles. And it all started with just 104 pill bottles. Now we typically get around 40,000 annually. So it's just grown from there. So our main initiative is the Items to Keep Out of the Landfill program. And it's completely volunteer run. And as of mid-2024, we have successfully diverted 650,000 items from the landfill for reuse. That doesn't even include the items we don't count. There are only certain items we count just because it's easier before we get it to the end user, or for example, those metal tabs on metal cans. We don't count all of those type thing. So egg cartons, mascara wands, pill bottles, milk bags, these are our counting items. So we're almost at 1 million. So that's kind of where Earthub is going with our Items to Keep Out of the Landfill program, and we're continuing with our volunteers.
That is so awesome and inspirational. So when people think like, oh, it's such a big problem, waste and sustainability, what can I do? Like, you're the perfect example of one person making a difference with an idea for one thing. How can I reuse this? And you found a way, and then you expand it out to all these things. So kudos to you, first of all, for doing that and starting this great organization. I know it's probably a lot of work, and you said it's all volunteer run, so nobody's cashing in on this. It's a labor of love, I guess.
It is.
Yeah, and I think it's a great message to folks that a lot of the things they consume every day can have a second life, and you can figure out a place to recycle them, whether it's a local organization like yours, something like TerraCycle, which you can mail things in, for hard to recycle items, or maybe a local collector, or even like I bring my egg cartons and glass jars to a lady at the farmer's market because she makes jams and sells her own eggs. So little things like that, I think, can really start to add up when you start doing it at scale. So your organization is a great example of something called the circular economy, and that's been a term that's kind of gained a lot of notoriety in the last few years. So let's start, I guess, by talking about what the circular economy is and how your organizations like yours are helping to achieve this mindset.
Yeah, so circular economy is when we use a product and we find additional ways to reuse it once it has exhausted its intentional use when it's purchased, rather than it going into the garbage. So, of course, there's items you can reuse multiple times, but eventually it might go to the garbage. But circular economy is extending that life for as long as possible. So an example I have is egg cartons. Egg cartons come with the purchase of eggs, whether that be directly from your grocery store or a local farmer. If you purchase them from a local farmer that you often return to, after you consume the eggs, that's an easy way to give the carton back to your local farmer so they can reuse them again. You could also use egg cartons for crafts, seed starters, or add it as shreds to a compost pile. Then, as a last resort, you could put it in the recycling, and that pulp will be processed in a factory to produce a new egg carton. So, with Earthub's items to keep out of the landfill program, we recirculate as much as possible by collecting specific items, and this varies by city, and we distribute them back into our communities for reuse. So, egg cartons is the perfect example of that. I'm currently in Ottawa. That's our main hub. So we do collect egg cartons and we distribute them back to local farmers or local food banks. Because typically local food banks, they receive the egg cartons in trays. So when they're in those trays, you can't distribute them to people who are coming to pick up the eggs. So we reuse those egg cartons for them so they can distribute accordingly. So our volunteers, we also optimize routes to minimize unnecessary trips when we transport our items to the end user or getting items to the central hub, which is my house. So this is kind of how we lower emissions while we're keeping something in the circular economy for reuse and increasing the longevity of the item.
Yeah, so you're not just making like one trip to get a couple egg cartons here and then the next day going back, and you're trying to, like you said, I guess, maximize the work for what you're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I mean, we talk about programs like this, and obviously, it's helping to reduce waste. But what are some of the other benefits to circular economy actions in terms of like climate change and biodiversity loss and maybe other environmental challenges? Because I think people sometimes only think, oh well, it's just a waste problem, but there's really a lot more that goes into it.
Right. So the more we consume, the more we contribute to climate change, loss of biodiversity, air pollution, like everything is connected. The Earthub approach with the items to keep out of the landfill program links primarily to emissions and climate change. And like I said, it goes hand in hand with our volunteers and how we transport items to where they need to be. So if somebody's on, the very west side of the city, I'm pretty central, and there's somebody else on the east side. If there is an end user in the west side, it doesn't make sense for the person in the east side to go all the way to the west side. They can kind of drop it off at my place, which is central, and then we wait for my place as being the central hub. If it needs to go west, we wait until somebody's already going that way. So this is saving emissions as we go along with our program. So I know I brought up egg cartons earlier, but it goes hand in hand with this example of the more you consume something, the more it needs to be produced and replenished for you to buy. So if you eat a lot of eggs, you're consequently going to go through many egg cartons. And because my math is my jam, we'll just say that if you eat 2 eggs every day, and just to be generous, we'll say you buy them in an 18-pack carton. That's 40 egg cartons per year. So if you go with the recycling option of the egg cartons, this equates to a truck picking up your egg cartons, bringing it to a recycling facility, the recycling facility using emissions to run the place and sort these egg cartons. The egg carton material is sent to a different factory via transportation, so there's even more emissions. And then the pulp is processed down with loads of water and other recyclable fibers. So that factory has to use emissions to produce a new egg carton, and then the egg carton will get transported to the egg producers who will then use it to pack the eggs. The eggs are then transported to a grocery store or other distributor. So if you visualize that entire process and then take the option where you bring your egg cartons to your local farmer where you consume the eggs in the first place, so in what option are you using less emissions, right? But a lot of people don't see that big picture. So you just have to remember that every little thing is connected. So if you multiply that by thousands of people in just your city alone, just imagine the emissions that you're producing just over egg cartons. If you think about your daily life, you're not just having eggs and consuming egg cartons, right? So you've got to think that everything you consume is really connected to this kind of process. So if you could cut down those emissions with so many things in your life, you could really make a difference when it comes to climate change. The higher the population gets and the more you consume, the more factories we need. Where do those factories go? Directly where our wildlife goes. And we all know how important bees are to the ecosystem and our future food. The more we eat up these habitats with factories and producers, the less biodiversity we're going to have. When we have biodiversity loss, we impact the ecosystem, which provides us with our oxygen, our carbon storage. It helps control floods. Literally everything is connected. And again, I use the egg carton example because this is an item Earthub accepts. So we sort them by type, we count them, and because data is super important to me and kind of the whole purpose of Earthub, when we distribute them, where they reuse them, we're actually counting all of these egg cartons to see how much we're keeping out of the landfill and reducing those carbon emissions that are happening with all the transportation if you do go with the recycling or the landfill route.
Yeah, and just, I mean, that's assuming people are recycling those egg cartons, right? It's not even talking about people just throwing them away or the materials needed to produce those in the first place, like the initial egg carton. Even if it does get reused over and over, it still, comes from somewhere, whether it's paper or cardboard from a tree or styrofoam or plastic or whatever it is. So yeah, the longer we can keep something in use, I think it's just beneficial, and hopefully folks can see the connection. I know it can be kind of a long, convoluted, or seem like we're drawing like really, thin lines between things, but it really does. I mean, everything we need comes from nature, and everything we do displaces something else. And like you said, prevents nature from providing the ecosystem services we needed. So I think it's a very important point. And hopefully, it shows why the circular economy is so important, something we should strive for. So another aspect of this circularity mindset, we've talked a lot about recycling and reducing our consumption, but repairability is also a big part of circularity. And right now we're seeing the right to repair movement have a lot of success around the world. So can you talk a little bit about what some of these are and why consumer protections are so important to ensure that people can repair their items? Because I think a lot of folks don't even realize that repairability is an option, and it's actually better for your wallet, better for the environment, and just better all around.
Mhm. So repairability is so important, and it is so gratifying to see these huge movements that have been coming to life as an option. I'm in total awe of, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, Patagonia. So they're a clothing company and they have the option to repair your item. And they actually have a buy use section on their website, I noticed. So this was something I kind of saw on social media. I'm a total thrifter. So I don't know too much about many clothing companies who are doing this type of thing, but this one really stood out to me because so many people were posting about it. So it's changes like this that bring us back to our egg carton circulation. In Ottawa, there's actually some type of library organizations, such as the Ottawa Tool Library and the Ottawa Outdoor Gear Library. So at these libraries, you can book out tools or outdoor gear, and therefore you're reducing more production of these items, just as we talked about with the egg cartons. The Ottawa Tool Library often has repair workshops, which is fantastic. They actually just had one for bicycle maintenance. And I know how frustrating it can be when you have something that's broken and you don't know exactly how to fix it. You can YouTube it or, go down the internet rabbit hole, but it is always so much easier in person when you have that demonstration right in front of you. So that's what I think is really neat about our Ottawa tool libraries. They're having these workshops, and in some of these workshops, they're just showing you how to use basic tools, which we don't learn that in school. So this is a great way to ingrain this in people and show them that you have the ability to fix what you already have. There is another company called Reform in Ottawa, and this company actually reuses construction materials and will reuse them for their displays, signage, the fabrication of desks, and whatnot. So that's another really cool thing to reuse what's already out there. Speaking from personal experience with repairability, I have called many companies where I have bought an appliance from them and it needed a repair. I've asked for a part or I asked if I could send back this appliance so they could fix it. And the answer I'd always get is they didn't have the said part I was looking for or that they didn't do the repairs. I remember having this food processor one time that broke on me, and I unscrewed everything to just see the little motor in there and to see if I could find something online where I could learn how to fix it or see what type of motor I should be buying to replace it with the broken one with. So not only could I not find the part, but I also don't have much expertise in mechanical engineering as my background is civil. So I'm not the greatest at fixing things, especially when there's not that in-person demonstration. So there's literally nothing I could do with this food processor that I had that was broken. And coming from somebody who cringes every time I go to the garbage can, I think it sat there for almost a year when I kept trying to brainstorm or go down rabbit holes to see what I could do with it. So I'll get more into this in our next point, but the consumer might have to pay for their garbage disposal or have a limited amount of items they can discard as well. So therefore, the producer just put this responsibility on the consumer. And that's why the repair option at minimum should be accessible to the consumer.
Yeah, and to go back to your point about Patagonia, I can personally attest to not only do they do repairs on clothes, but they repair gear. So I have a backpack that started to tear. I took it to the Patagonia store. The closest one for me is in Dublin, but they took it and sent it to their repair shop somewhere in Europe, fixed it for free, and mailed it back to me. And I bought this thing years ago, so it had definitely gone through some wear and tear, but they guarantee their products for life. So like, even if you use it to death and it has an issue, they will fix it and honor their products. So companies like that are amazing. Unfortunately, they're very rare and hard to come by. But sometimes you pay a little more upfront, but then you get the product last longer. So you really get your money's worth out of it, especially if they will honor and repair things, like you said. And we did an episode on the right to repair a couple years ago, where Eugene was actually on that, one of our other podcasters. But he talked a lot about, using things like YouTube as great resources. And it seems like people make videos for how to fix everything these days, right? Like, God bless those people, because like I wouldn't have the patience. But it's definitely one of the better things about the internet, I'll say. And there's sites like iFixit that offer tools and manuals on how to fix so many things now. So if there's something broken, there's a lot more resources than we used to have, and I think that's really encouraging. So let's go on, and you kind of alluded to this, but let's talk about the waste reduction arm of the circular economy. That's something that you're working on, I guess, directly at Earthub. But what are some of the challenges in this area, and again, what's some of the progress that's been made?
So waste reduction is a huge challenge for some individuals, and like I said, this could tie right into the right to repair movement. A lot of people want to do their part and make a difference, but our fast-paced lives don't always make that easy. So many people don't know what to do, how to avoid things that cause a lot of waste, or have the financial means to make certain changes. Most people are going to always opt for convenience, and convenience isn't always eco-friendly. If we're short on time and we couldn't meal prep, we might eat takeout more. In some scenarios, we could be super rushed, and that limits our options for something quick. We could find ourselves in situations where our option leaves us with a small pile of garbage, and we couldn't prevent it because that day we were super busy. So this ties right into eating takeout. It is definitely a lifestyle that could make things challenging in the waste reduction department. I'm in Ontario, so a huge change that is currently in transition is the new blue box regulation. They do call it blue box, which we put our glass, metal, and plastic in, but it also includes the black box, which we put paper and cardboard in. So this regulation has stimulated the individual producer responsibility, or IPR. So what's happening in Ontario right now is producers are now environmentally and financially responsible for their packaging. This means they will now be responsible for curbside recycling in the entire province. So where I am from, in the city of Ottawa, the city of Ottawa will no longer be responsible for recyclables come this transition period, like the time it fully transitions over, which will be January 1st, 2026. So the city of Ottawa has been, trying to implement plans of how to navigate this change we're going to go through with the province. And come September 30th of this year, our new curbside policy in Ottawa will be a 3-item garbage bag limit. So this will kind of make people click and realize that they have a limit and force them to recycle is kind of the idea they're going with this. Of course, with that being said, there is the whole other topic of illegal dumping, but that's a conversation for another day because I could go on and on about that one. But I think this limit is a great shift to make people realize that their waste is limited. So this also brings us back to the consumer. The consumer would not be financially responsible for the disposal of the product's packaging now that the producer would be responsible for it. So I just actually recently did a blog post on this topic, which is on our website. But I'm sure there's so many different changes happening across Canada, and I don't know too much about the systems in the States. But this is how we can tie back into circularity and waste reduction and why it's so important and how our municipalities and cities are tying this into our everyday lives.
So are you saying that the producers of these products are actually the ones responsible for the curbside pickup and other collection points now, or will be when this is implemented?
Yeah, so for example, Coca-Cola. So if we buy a Coca-Cola plastic bottle from them, they are now responsible for that plastic bottle. So there is a whole process in place. It's not just Coca-Cola that they're like, "Oh, I have to count every single one of my plastic bottles that come back into me that I recover from recycling." But they do hire producer responsible organizations. So these are called pros, and they're kind of the representative for an umbrella of companies. So it could be Coca-Cola and Kraft and all of these producers combined together. The pro is going to help them create this curbside recycling system, essentially. Because Coca-Cola, I mean, of course, I don't know their departments and what knowledge they have in being a recycling system, right? Whereas these pros do. So actually, if the producer doesn't hit the targets that are set out in a regulation come 2026, there will be financial penalties involved. So this really is holding the producer accountable. This could also tie in, and I don't know how much you see of this in Dublin, but in Canada, everyone is complaining about the grocery prices. So there's wins, but there's also a consequence. Again, topic for another time, but essentially at the end of the day, the producer is going to have to see, okay, I have to recover everything I just produced and put out there in the first place.
It sounds like a radical concept because we've done it differently for so long, but I mean, honestly, it's how things should be. And I'm excited to see how it works in practice because, I mean, as a Canada's the neighbor to the US where I'm from, so it'd be really cool if it worked. I'm sure there was a lot of industry pushback and lobbying, and they just threw a lot of fits, but I'm glad it got through. And yeah, really interested to see how it goes because things like this, like kind of bold new programs, are what we're going to need because obviously what we're doing isn't working. Is it a nationwide program or just in Ontario?
So it will be nationwide, but I don't know the different steps that each province is taking.
Okay.
I haven't researched enough into that. So primarily what I know about is Ontario. But
Okay.
with some light reading and connections, of course, BC, British Columbia, is
Hmm.
the trailblazer for all of Canada when it comes to environmentally friendliness.
Yeah.
So I know they're way ahead, but I truly at this time I haven't done enough research to kind of pinpoint what's different amongst each province of
Okay.
what each province is doing. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's still exciting. Progress is progress, even if it's small, and we just need to keep pushing for that, everywhere, and not letting the business get away with pushing it back to us. Because really, like you mentioned earlier in the show, something about how the business pushes basically the waste responsibility onto the consumer. That's what recycling is. I mean, there was an effort years ago between I think the bottle companies to make the consumer feel like it was their responsibility to not litter and to recycle. And in that way, they kind of got away from having to deal with the trash they produce or producing it more sustainably. So yeah, it's really interesting that now maybe it's coming full circle, like the theme of our show. So um, yeah, so I guess my next question is about how consumers can implement circular practices. And this is obviously acknowledging that consumers shouldn't have to do it all, that businesses and organizations should have a responsibility to a certain extent. But I mean, obviously, as consumers, we do use products, so we want to do our part and not just say, like, oh, I'm one person, what difference can it make? Because clearly you're an example of how much difference one person can make when it comes to reducing waste. But yeah, so as consumers, how can we implement circular practices into our own lives and also demand change at a higher level?
So yeah, like you said, I think Earthub is a prime example of how one person can really make waves. I do what I do with Earthub with a team of volunteers. And yeah, like I said earlier in the show, a lot of people want to make a difference or make a change. They just don't know how. So I think that really drew a lot of volunteers into our program to see that together we can really keep more out of the landfill, which is great. So I kind of a not so much high level. Um, as a consumer, each time you're spending money, you are casting a vote. So if you are continuously spending money on single use items, you're also saying you want more of those items. Those small tweaks every day can make a difference if you choose not to buy those items. On a higher level, you could implement Earth Hub practices in your workplace, whether that be an office, school, construction site. We spend a huge portion of our lives at work. So, getting into circular practices that could influence the people around you at work could also make a huge change. Next thing you know, all of these people are bringing items in from home. That's a life, or sorry, they're implementing this circular economy at home if they're already doing it at work. And that's a huge lifestyle change. At that point, you've hit the realization and you want more changes and more differences. Look into your city or municipality's surveys or public engagements, participate in those and make your voice count. I think that really makes a difference in your area. I've recently gotten more into this type of thing, and it is making me realize more and more how much your voice does count. It is your tax dollars, right? So you can be the voice of change at a higher level for sure.
Yeah, and a lot of times the folks who show up to the public meetings and talk are the only ones they hear. So that's who they think, um, that's the only voice they think, wants to be heard. So if we're not there, sharing what we want and demanding change for our, causes, then maybe they don't know about them just because they're not hearing. So yeah, I definitely think civic engagement's important. Voting for sure, especially it's an election year in the U.S. and thinking about things like climate and other social issues are very important. So I definitely get involved in any way that you can. Um, I do want to ask, since you mentioned that organizations like yours can kind of make a big difference. What advice would you offer folks who want to start something similar, or maybe, I don't know, try their hand at a larger collection program in their communities?
The advice I would give is looking back at when we spoke about the egg cartons, and if you recycle them and the truck that has to pick it up, it going to the recycling facility, it's getting processed again, it getting distributed back to the grocery store, whoever's using the egg carton. If you really give your mind that mentality, you start looking around at items to be like, how can I reuse this? This doesn't necessarily have to go back into our waste streams or recycling bins, right? So I think just looking and it is hard in your everyday life. I mean, we live very fast paced lives, especially in the US and Canada. So it is really hard to think about these things on the fly or daily. But I'm telling you, as soon as you look at one item, you're gonna start looking at more items because that's exactly what happened with Earthub. I started craving what else could we keep out of the landfill? What else could be reused in our system? So I think that's the advice I would give listeners, and implementing it, especially in your workplace, because we do spend so much time at work and people around us are always watching. You never know who you can inspire.
I love that. Yeah. Sometimes you don't even have to be forceful with it either. Like my last job, I just did my own thing and reused stuff, and composted at work, and little by little people would start doing it, or just tell me, oh, because I saw you doing this, I started doing this. So it can be subtle, and in a way it's almost like you're guilting them into it, but you don't have to be overtly yelling at people all the time. I think a lot of us think that's what it takes. So
That's so true. And what's funny about that is I know Canada is famous for Tim Hortons,
yeah.
and um, pre 2020, I mean, they started implementing it again, but single use obviously became the main thing in 2020. But prior to that, I remember I'd be working at construction companies, and a lot of the guys would always be asking me why I do what I do with Earthub, and I take so much time with it. And they'd always notice that my Tim Hortons, my steeped tea, would always be in a reusable mug every time when I was on site. And they were always getting the single use cups and just
Mm.
throwing them out. And I didn't even have to push this on anyone. I just said, you know what? I use my reusable mug and I get 10 cents off
Yeah.
every time I buy my hot beverage. And next thing you know, the construction workers started doing it too. So I love
Nice.
that. You can rub off on people
Yeah.
around you.
And the financial incentive's just a bonus, but I think too, just having a reusable mug it's nicer. Your hand doesn't burn. It keeps it warm longer. There's more than one benefit, but that's great. Yeah, great example of just, I guess, leading by example quietly, and people just starting to adopt the behaviors, because we are social creatures, like you mentioned. So, well, is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to touch on, or maybe anything you want to expand on?
So I think it is really hard as a person to know what difference you can make. If you feel, I'm just one person, what can I do? There are so many books, podcasts, documentaries that you can look into. Definitely getting into municipality and city conversations. One channel I really love is called Sam's Good News Channel, and it's by a gentleman called Sam Bentley. And I love this channel because it shares good news and climate action, which certainly gives a lot of hope and inspiration, because it can be a bit daunting, and we all suffer from a bit of eco anxiety and, what's going to happen, what's going to change. So definitely check out Sam's Good News Channel, because I think it will, show people things are changing and we are making impacts, and it'll make everybody feel better about the direction we can go with being eco-friendly.
Yeah, definitely need to balance out the bad news stories with inspiring ones, because any of us in this space that care about this kind of stuff, it's very easy to get depressed or feel hopeless or whatever when all you hear is the bad. But there are folks like you and Sam and other people doing good things to help inspire the rest of us, I think. So thanks for sharing that. Are there any other resources while we're at it that you want to share with folks? Any books, podcasts, documentaries that you found particularly moving?
I really like Going Green Media. That's another it's a couple who does a lot of sustainability content and environmentally friendly travel and that kind of thing. So you can find them. They're on Instagram, and they always do kind of vlogs and whatnot. So they're really great. I've also recently really been working on blogs on Earthub. So our website is www.earthub.ca, and Earthub is just Earth and Hub combined into one word with just one H, because a lot of people put Earth with the H and then Hub with the H. It's just combined with one H. But you can definitely check out the blog posts I've been putting up there. They come out every Thursday evening, but I really want to spread environmental awareness or eco-friendly travel, that kind of thing. So I've been sharing that as a resource to people as well.
Awesome. Yeah, great places. And we'll tag all those or link all those in the show notes if you're interested in following up with any of that. I guess we'll go ahead and move on now to our green life hack portion of the show. This is where we share one thing that listeners can do to live more sustainably, because it can be overwhelming, hearing all this stuff. So we try to give at least one thing you can go away with and start on your journey to sustainability. So Britney, what is your green life hack this month?
Well, this month, especially for it being summertime, I'm sure a lot of people have AC units on, whether it be central AC or whether you have a portable AC unit in your home. Personally, as a renter, I have a portable AC unit in our home. And occasionally, when it gets really, really hot, the water in the AC unit does pile up and it automatically shuts off. So when we go to empty it, I mean, my partner will always kind of roll his eyes or giggle at me, but I'm literally capturing the water, even if it's just a little bit, I'm putting it in a planter or something, so that I can reuse it to water my vegetable garden. So that's another, tie in to circular economy. Use what you have, you know. So that's a green hack I'm currently doing, especially for these hot summer months.
I love that because I used to do that myself when I had a house and an AC. And in Texas, it ran a lot and it collected a lot of water. And yeah, I definitely made use of it because it is such a waste. Water is a precious resource, and the plants need it. So why not use it? It's a win-win, Yeah, so that's a great one. And my green life hack is actually in the theme of sustainable or of circular economy and repairability. I had to get a new phone earlier this year. Unfortunately, I had stretched mine as long as I could. It was like 5 or 7 years old. I don't know, but it had been repaired. It had, lived a great life, but it gets to a point where the cost of repairing it is the same as a new phone, and it doesn't work as well and whatever. So I got a Fairphone, and I don't know if you can see it on the screen, but Fairphone is a Dutch company that produces the phones with the intent that everything is repairable and replaceable. So I can, if I need to, replace the camera, the speaker, the battery. Like, remember when batteries, you could just pop them in and out of phones? Not anymore. But this phone is meant to be as sustainable as possible. It is a little pricier. They also, source everything either from sustainably mined items or recycled electronics. So in that way, it's great. They pay people a living wage. They try to do everything as ethically as possible. So if you're in the market for a new phone and you're able to get one of these phones, they do have to be sold to resellers over in North America, I believe. But in Europe, it's a little bit easier. They are fully unlocked as well, dual SIM. So there's a lot of benefits. And I got this really cool upcycled wood case as well from another company that makes sustainable cases. So in the spirit of sustainability or repairability, I should say, definitely, phones are a big one. Like they use so many resources. So definitely suggest this company. So, well, thank you, Britney, for joining. And one more time, can you plug where we can find your organization or you online?
Yeah, so Earthub you can find on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. All of our links are up on our website, www.earthub.ca, which I knew you said you would link to the podcast in the next few weeks. So, yeah, that's where you can find us.
Awesome. And yeah, you can find this podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts, not Google Podcasts anymore because they are gone. So you've probably noticed if you use that platform. But we're also on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I personally am on Instagram and Twitter at Het's Gonna Be Me. And occasionally you can find me at the Geeky and Marginally Geeky podcast, which are our sister shows as well. So thanks again for being on, Britney, and for everyone listening. Have a great rest of your day.